Welcome racers to the track tutorial for Abandoned Atoll. I'll first be running through all of the possible different routes, and then we'll be doing specific strategies. At the start of the race, you always want to head right across the breach rather than the wall ride. It's slightly faster for all vehicles and it gives more opportunities for pickups. If you're feeling fancy, you can jump over the water here. At the hairpin, you want to brake at varying points and then take the jump here. This is the quickest way to take this section by far. The standard route through the track is to head this way. This is optimal. It's fairly challenging for tanks, but speedsters have no reason not to go this way. Bounce off the barrier here if you head out wide. Tanks need to do this. And then take the bridge here. Instead of taking one of the ramps, you charge a launch and jump over the barrier here. This gives you a much better alignment. If the car slides, you can use a little bit of nitro to straighten it out. Ideally, you want to jump onto the pads at the start of this straight, and then boost all the way along here. Tanks want to take the wall ride almost all the time. Very rarely do you want to head inwards with tanks on laps other than the first. Once again, around the hairpin, up onto the metal track, which cuts out a technical section. Now this time, I believe, yeah, okay, this is going to be aiming for a slightly better lap time than on the first lap. So, again, bounce off the barrier. Don't worry too much about riding it, but try and get off it as soon as you can, because it can mess with you. Again, jump over the barrier and onto the final straight. Manage the launch this time. You'll see that you can actually hit with Tempest speeds of about 750 kilometers per hour. Now showing other routes. This time in the ship. It's actually showing what happens when things go wrong. So I jump off the ceiling here, and as you can see, it's not pretty. The car tumbles. This is the only real way of getting inside the ship in this way, and you really don't want to see it. You need to be careful going through here. It's very easy to hit that pillar. Okay, sorry, now we're on to alternate routes. So skipping the metal path, you generally don't want to do this. It's a sharp left, which requires pretty heavy braking. And now the higher jump over the ship. This is one of the worst routes to take. You generally don't want to be going this way, mainly because of how hard you have to brake over that crest. Then onto this ceiling ride. It's very easy to get caught on the pillars on the sides of this, so you need to be very careful to stay in the middle of the road. One of the advantages is that it does give you a very straight alignment onto the final straight. It's pretty slow though. This time we're heading around the outside. There's a slight chicane here, which if you align yourself correctly, you can take with minimal steering and no braking. This takes you in here, and I didn't take it the best here, but ideally you want to turn such that you cut across the beach. You'll see that even though I made a slight error, it is not that much slower than taking the optimal route. And it's a lot safer for tanks. Tanks in particular really want to consider taking the wall ride. you'll see here that pretty good lap times are possible. I think this is a more optimal approach. Yeah, you can see a lot of speed is retained. It's a very direct route. It even takes you through power-ups. When you pull it off, it is very quick and not far behind the optimal routes. One more time. So here you see a slightly easier and more consistent way of doing it. You jump more wide, take the banked path across, and end up a little bit wider, a little bit slower, but much, much safer. Okay, next up is probably the worst route by far, actually, in the ship, and that is staying grounded. You'll see you can't really take that much speed through it either because of the nasty pillar in your way, and it's so much longer. There's no boost pads. It's a bad time all round. This is somewhere that you want to go only in an emergency, only when you have no other option. Okay, now I'll be shooting for what I would consider to be pretty optimal times. I hesitate to say optimal because I don't think I'm that good, honestly. But you'll see here, I think we're headed for a 58, or maybe a 59. Okay, say a 59 time. So sub 1 minute is pretty doable. Just showing here what happens if you mess up the jump onto the metal bridge. It's not good. So we have a 59 time, but we can do better than that with Tempest. One of the big make or break moments on this track is the route through the ship, especially if you're taking the ceiling ride, because Tempest and tanks in general do not have a good time here. See that just slightly ahead of my Ghost here, and then over the barrier, just catch the car, and along the final straight for a 58 time. So the track is very difficult with tanks. It's quite bumpy. There's a fair amount of turning, and the best route is very sketchy, so you do want to consider taking the wall ride on the right hand side of the ship area. Next, we'll be looking at how the medium cars take the track. So this will go much quicker since we don't have to explore every possibility. So as before, even more so here, because of the better handling of these cars, head across the beach at the start of the race. Jump over the water because it slows you down. And take the optimal route through the ship, which is the ceiling ride. Again, kind of like with tanks, you're okay bouncing off the wall. It's a lot safer with the medium cars. They tend to stay stuck to the roof a lot better. And much more stable on the landing. Ideally, you want to head along the wall ride on subsequent laps with medium cars. Is slightly quicker, at least for reverser. You'll see in a minute though that it's not that much quicker, but it is very consistent, very safe. Can avoid hitting the wall entirely in the ceiling ride if you manage to get a good landing. And as always, use whatever nitro you have left along the final straight. So you'll see that that lap got about a minute and a half a second. I believe we'll be taking the outside path this time, the wall ride route through the ship. Slight error. Managed to catch it. Chicane is absolutely no problem for the lighter cars. Through the wall ride. Onto the beach. Again, a slight loss of control there, but managed to catch it. And you'll see the ghost up ahead. Just made it onto the final straight. So even with a couple of slight sloppy errors, I think we'll come in a second or two slower. Quite a few seconds actually. This route is one you want to avoid at all costs. It's very difficult to take. Sometimes it can be necessary if you are destabilized on the way into the wall ride. But as you can see, the car didn't take the transition very nicely, and it is best avoided despite there being a pickup opportunity. It's also slower than committing to either of the full routes. So you can slam that barrier pretty hard and still stay stuck. So that's a big part of why this route is optimal right now. Much cleaner lap up till now, so we're going to have another go at the wall ride to give a little bit more of a representative look at how quick this route is for medium cars. So another slight tweak on the landing there, but nothing significant. So you'll see the car, the Ghost, just up ahead, which took the optimal route. It's maybe a second quicker. Second and a half or so. You'll see in the time. Yeah, so it was about 1.8 seconds quicker. Demonstrating the difference between the beach and the wall ride here for reverser. You'll see that we come out more or less right next to the other car. It's actually very slightly quicker with how I executed both paths to take the beach, but with how much more potential for things going wrong there is on the beach, still probably safer to stick to the wall ride. You really don't want to lose control like that on the bridge, because you absolutely can get stuck against the supports on either side, and that is a really bad time. So, as with most tracks, the mid-class cars are very competitive. They get about a second and a half slower times overall than the tanks, but they're much more controllable, and they have a lot of flexibility with which routes you can pick, both the wall ride and the ceiling ride through the ship, and both routes at the start of the track. So now on to Speedsters. Again, as you'd expect, take the beach. This time you can consider taking the pad there. It's not really worth it ever, in my opinion, but if any class of car is going to benefit from it, it is the Speedsters. Can brake very late on the hairpin here, but as you can see, I am a Terry Bad, and I missed my jump. Speedsters really have no option when going into the ship. They absolutely have to take the ceiling ride. They're not fast enough to support taking the wall ride, so they really need to cut out as much of the track as possible while also getting as many speed boosts as possible, and that is what the ceiling ride does for them. Of course, for Speedsters, taking the beach on subsequent laps is actually quite a bit quicker than taking the wall ride. Really want to avoid taking the wall ride with Speedsters unless you have a firestorm, a boost, or absolutely need to due to being shot at. So really want to jump over the water as well, because Speedsters struggle to carry high speeds, ironically. So every kilometer per hour you can hold on to is precious. So that was a pretty solid lap, and you'll see we got 1.6 second time. Speedsters struggle to optimize further than that. You really have to get things perfect to beat 1.02 times, but you can quite consistently hit 1.02, 1.02.5, that sort of region. A lot of routes are very slow for Speedsters. You really want to stick to the optimal. But you do have the benefit of so much grip that you can generally recover from either mistakes or weapon hits quite easily. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time watching, and I hope this helped.